So today we're talking about a really important topic. We're talking about your wrists, and we're going to show you how to set or how to load your wrist correctly in the backswing. So welcome back to the Forest of Arden, where we're talking about the wrists in the backswing, and we're going to show you how to set or how to load them correctly. Just before we get started, if you're new here, if you're not a subscriber, I would absolutely love you to be part of my channel and this community, because I really believe these videos can help you better understand your golf swing, better understand the game of golf, and ultimately help you enjoy your time on the course a little bit more. So go ahead down into the description box if you do like this video and click that subscribe button. So the lesson plan today is really to start off by looking at the wrist and kind of understanding the two movements that it has and are available to us, and then really looking at what we actually need to do as we move from setup to the top of the backswing in order to create some good leverage, which can help us hit the ball a bit further, and also how to control the club face, which is really quite important, as you can imagine, for controlling the direction that the ball heads in. So what are the wrist movements that we have? Well, if you were to take your lead wrist and just hold your arm out in front of you and just hold your forearm, and the important thing here is this forearm is not going to move in this little demonstration. Now, the first movement we have is this movement here, where I can use my wrist to point my fingers down towards the ground and then more out in front of me. The other option I have, if I turn and face this, is we have this movement here, where my fingers are now pointing more to my left and more to my right. Now, we could have this motion as well, but this is actually more of a forearm rotation rather than a movement to the wrist. So if anybody ever says to you, roll your wrists, the wrists do not have a rolling motion. They have this motion and they have this motion, and that is all. And we're going to specifically look at those two today rather than any rotation of the forearm. So the first thing would be, we have to give ourselves the chance to set the wrists in the backswing. What do I mean by that? Well, if I place my hand in this position where my fingers are running parallel to my forearm, the greatest range of motion I have is actually to point my fingers down towards the ground. From here, I don't have much range of motion to point my fingers more up. So when we actually place our hands on the club, this is where we give ourselves the option to use the wrist in the backswing, because watch what happens when I place my hand on this golf club. I'm going to point my fingers right the way down towards the ground, and I'm then going to place my hand on the golf club. So when I open up my hand, you can see that my wrist is not really in a particularly natural position. But when I move it back towards this natural position, that's when we create this movement, which you may well as a wrist set or wrist hinge or wrist cock or whatever word you would like to use. So when we actually go back to this position here, now if I open up my hand, you can see that it's actually now more in its natural position. So we may well kind of say that our wrist set or our wrist cock is actually as we apply the hand to the golf club, and then during the golf swing, we're just moving our hand back to its natural position. So if you're really struggling to set those wrists in the backswing, there's a very, very good chance that when you place your hand on the club, you're not creating enough of that offset to begin with. So you can see my fingers run parallel to my forearm, and then I don't have any range of motion to try and use in the backswing. So it's really important that we create this offset to begin with, which allows us to then use that in the backswing to create this wrist set. So how we place our hands on the golf club is absolutely vital in this element of the golf swing. If we're looking to create some good set or load in the backswing, you have to place the hands on correctly. So that's number 1 point. So the second thing would be, when I take my setup position, my wrist is going to be slightly cupped. It's going to be slightly extended for most of you if you've got a neutral grip and your handle position is good relative to the golf ball. So what we're looking to do in the backswing is we're looking to hinge the golf club up, which is going to be allowed if we've created that good wrist set. And we're also looking to take this wrist, which is cupped, and move it towards a more flat or neutral position. So we're actually moving from this position up to here, and from a cupped position to a flat position. Now, what I would really like as a preference would be for that to be done by at least sort of halfway just past in the golf swing. What we wouldn't really want is to have a backswing where we get to this point here and we've still got all of those things to do. We've got to set the wrist and flatten the wrist. That's really quite difficult. So the little exercise I'd have you do is take the starting position, and when your lead arm reaches level with the ground, you're trying to create about a 90-degree angle between the lead arm and the golf club, and you're trying to create a flat lead wrist where I can see between the back of my hand and my lead forearm, you can see how they're fairly neutral. So what do we often see? Well, the two common things we would see is one where a golfer doesn't set the wrists quick enough. So you can see when I get to this point here, I don't really have any wrist set. And when they do start to set the wrist, this is very, very cupped here, creating a very, very open club face. So what you'll notice when I do this correctly is that that leading edge of the golf club, or the grooves, as I view it from that camera, are fairly vertical. This would be a more open club face with a cupped wrist. We want to get that to more vertical. So if you're looking to set your wrist correctly, load your wrists in the backswing, we have to start with the grip. That's really, really important. Once we've got the grip correct, it's really just making some rehearsals where we move to lead arm level of the ground, club is vertical as we view from face on, and lead wrist is flat. I've now loaded my wrists in terms of my wrist set, and I've flattened my wrist, which controls the club face. And effectively, in the backswing, that's the wrist's only job. It's to create some leverage and to control the club face. Both pretty important things, I'm sure you'll agree, but we can do that by the time we get to lead arm horizontal. Let's go ahead and hit one. Now, what do we see from the best players in the world? Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. So very often they all set their wrists at different places and different rates in the golf swing. You'll see someone like a Rory where it's a fairly wide set, and then someone with a slightly earlier set. So there's different models, but what we've given you here is a pretty good guide if this is something you feel you struggle with. It's a reference point, it's something to work towards, and it really doesn't matter if you're a little bit later or a little bit earlier, as long as you're in that ballpark, you're not sort of at the extremes where the wrist set is far too early or it's far too late. That's really what we're trying to avoid. So setting the wrist correctly in the backswing will give you a couple of things which are quite useful to your game. Control of the club face and some good leverage which you can use to generate some club head speed. As I said a moment ago, both pretty important things. So create some good wrist set by ensuring your hands are placed on the club correctly, and then work on that little exercise to help you control those elements of your golf swing. Thanks for watching. Usual stuff is down below, comments box down there, like button down there. And also please share this video if you think you know someone who could benefit from the information within it. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. Thank you again for watching. We'll see you back here again soon.